So that the grey, but get rid of it in the goatee. Yeah, can't get rid of that. Look at that. That's real grey, that. Authentic grey. That.
I've got 3 grey hairs somewhere. They pop up. So
hey, just brush it to one side, mate. Nobody will notice. Nobody will care and nobody will notice.
Yeah.
So, get this thing rolling. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. We are going deep inside the minds of the world's greatest arm wrestlers one more time. And one of North America's finest, and he's in a bit of a resurgence right now. Now, a lot of people that are regulars to my show will know this guy. For those of you who don't know this guy, let me tell you something about him. And I'm going to start with one key thing, and it's outside of arm wrestling. A lot of people always say, you know what, that guy's a really nice guy. And sometimes they mean it. And sometimes they don't mean it that much. It's just a nice thing to say. But for this particular bloke, that really does apply. Forget inside arm wrestling, outside arm wrestling, or anywhere else. There are few people I've ever met more stout, more straight up than Jamie the Natural Sheldon. And it is a pleasure to have you on the show, mate. How is it hanging?
that was probably the best introduction I've ever heard in my life, Neil. I appreciate that. I think my likability is just under a Paul Lynn. And I'm cool with that because they don't get much better than him either.
Paul Lynn unites the clans. He brings in the ladies. That's why we got him on the fix, Jamie. There's a little bit of Paul. Been getting a bit of stick recently, though, in the comments. People saying he looks like an orc.
He's an amazing dude. Amazing dude.
He is an amazing dude. Does look a bit like an orc.
He does.
Because somebody sent me a picture through the other day. I love Paul to death. And somebody sent me a picture through of the White Orc. Now, if you know Paul Lynn, ladies and gentlemen, go and check out the White Orc and Paul Lynn. And from certain angles, I don't know.
You know what I need
White
to do?
Orc could be a
I need to do this, Neil. I told you I was going to do this, and you told me not to, but I got to do it. Okay, so here's my introduction for Neil Pickup. Ladies and gentlemen,
here we go.
In his mother fluffin' house, I would like to introduce my host, multiple national, European, and world champion, the greatest arm wrestler to come out of the UK. He will go down in history as one of the greatest sports commentators of all time, along with Chick Hearn, along with Vince Scully. Goes by the name The Fat Lad, but I know him as the UK Natural, and I stole his nickname. Or maybe I borrowed it. We'll talk about that at some point. Neil Pickup, my friend.
Mate, that is lovely. Thank you very much indeed. And I'll take that all day, Jamie. You know what? I've done a lot of these shows, buddy. I've done a lot of these shows. And I was very, very keen to get you on for a number of reasons. Because you're a guy who flies under the radar a little bit. You're out and about a lot. You get your face around on a number of the shows and so on, and you always seem to be the guy that crops up in tournaments, and yet you don't necessarily get that respect. In fact, let's bring it right up to the present day. You have literally, I believe this last weekend, just scooped another win, and this time with a point of difference because it was above your natural weight class. You ordinarily would compete anywhere up to sort of 187s, and I think were you at 198s or 200s this weekend?
Yes, I weighed in at 197 point something, fully dressed. 198 weight class. So I'm a little heavier than normal, but yes, I generally don't compete at that weight, but I figured, it's kind of the off season, so I like to stay heavy. So I just said, hey, I'll show up and see.
What are you stripped right now, Jamie? What would you be stripped naked?
About 193, probably.
Okay, so yeah, you're a big version of you, without a doubt.
For sure.
Do you notice the strength, Jamie, when you get bigger? Do you really notice that you're a much stronger guy at that weight?
Oh, absolutely. In the gym, of course. On the table, yes. And people ask me all the time, would I pull middleweight? I don't think my strength level can compete at the elite middleweight. So I know my place in life. I belong in the 170s as far as like WAL and things like that. But yeah, I can pop up in a 198 class and shake things up a little bit. So I prefer to be heavier. I have no injuries when I'm heavier. I recover great. Like I feel fine. Like the only real person that ripped my arm off was in the after pool, and I was messing around with Jordan Sill, of course. So other than that, I felt great from the tournament. So, yeah, it was fun.
So you can see, ladies and gents, right up to the present day, Jamie extremely active. He's out there, he's putting his face out, and he's putting arms on pads, more importantly. But what we want to do, obviously the nature of this show, we want to show people, give a bit of a window on your soul, Jamie. So we want to take things way, way, way back and find out your sort of origins as a man and how you got into arm wrestling and then your progression through the sport. And I know you've got plenty of stories to tell. Having sat down with you for a drink a few times, I know you're not shy. So we wanted to sort of get into that a little bit. What's the one thing I wanted to always dig into, mate, was around that you're obviously a guy who's got mixed heritage and you're a guy that's very proud of that. You always put on your signatures, there's an element of the Jamaican there. Do you want to just walk, is that a good starting point to find out sort of your background and family and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I'm first generation American. My parents are, well, my mom is from Jamaica, born, I think she came over here in the early 60s when she was 18. So she's from Jamaica, grew up with Bob Marley, actually. So there's some interesting stories there. Like, yeah, she knew him.
She actually grew up with Bob Marley.
Right. And ironically, we still have property in Jamaica that I might utilize at some point, right on the beach. So,
oh my God.
Actually, I got to call my mother about that and figure out what we're doing with that. But,
that would be wonderful.
Oh yeah. So I don't have the natural tan because I am half black, half white. So, the other end of the spectrum is my dad's from England, as you know. So he grew up there, came over here in the 50s. Interesting story how they met. I think my mother was on a bus traveling somewhere, and my aunt and my uncle at the time were sitting right behind her, and they're English, and he was cracking jokes and just being a nice, lovely guy like he was. And my mom was laughing because, the Brits are hilarious, right? And my mother ended up turning around, and then she ended up making friends with my aunt, my dad's younger sister, and they became best friends. And she's like, oh, well, I've got a brother, and he's in the military. And then that's how my parents met. It was sort of by chance, which was kind of weird, but it kind of makes a great story. So yeah,
absolutely, mate.
The world, and they ended up meeting.
And for those people who are wondering where the flags always come from, and a lot of your posts always have that in your social media, and looks cool as hell as well.
Oh yeah,
it's got to be honest. Great for the PR and the marketing. It looks fantastic, doesn't it? Both really good flags as well. So all good there, mate. Where's the sporting side of things from? Was your mum very sporty? Your dad very sporty? Because obviously Jamaica, they can churn out a sportsman, can't they? Just.
Oh yeah. Yeah, my mom was in track when she was younger, so she was more. Well, from what she tells me, she was more into that. Amazingly strong too. Like she's in her 70s now, and there's a pull-up bar at their house, and she can almost do a pull-up, like when she's, and it's amazing because she's had help in the past, and so there's some natural abilities there, and my dad, soccer player. Oh man, yeah. In fact, interesting story there. When my dad came over here in the 50s, there was no organized soccer in Southern California until my grandfather and one of his buddies actually started the Riverside Soccer Club, and that kind of paved the way for Southern California soccer. So soccer's in my DNA. Like if I could have made it in something, it would have been that. So I came out with soccer ball. Yeah. So, and my dad was a really.
I mean, you're saying your dad English. My God, he doesn't get much more English than being mad on soccer.
Oh
I mean, it's the game over here, without where all the money is, So yeah. Did you play a lot of soccer as a kid?
Yeah, we played up until let's see, I got into club soccer. I must have been 10 or 11, I think, and then I played up until high school. And the only reason I stopped playing is because I'm on this club team. We travel, we beat people. You have that group, and then we all went to different high schools. So I just stopped playing because it wasn't the same. Funny story there is, you've heard of Landon Donovan, right?
Yeah.
He's kind of like the American soccer player of my generation, ended up making millions. We used to beat the crap out of his team. congratulations to him for making it, but like we had some guys on our team that probably could have made it to that level, which, so it was kind of fun to tell that story. It's like, yeah, I know that guy. I used to play against him, None of us made it that far, but, I think I could have if we, would have stuck with it. But I got to high school and I wanted to play football and, be the man. And, that's how that went.
How big is soccer in that area now where you live? Is it decent? Is there quite a good following over there? Because, it's funny, for Americans, soccer sort of flies under the radar a bit. And yet, now and again, you see your international team and they're not to be underrated. I've seen them do very well against some very solid teams, And I always wonder how much talent pool are you picking from? How much interest are the guys in the US and the girls in the US taking in soccer? Is a lot of people playing?
Oh yeah, it's huge out here. There's AYSO, which is American Youth Soccer Organization, I think it's called. And I think the Riverside Soccer Club that my grandfather started kind of paved the way for that.
Yeah.
And so, there's millions of kids that have played out here. And I just remember every weekend we were at the soccer fields, and my dad was reffing too. And so soccer's in my DNA. I don't play it much anymore, but, ironically, when I got into football, because I could kick, I was the guy kicking off and running down and making the tackle. Cause I was a defensive player in soccer and in football. Mm-hmm. So the fact that I could kick, I was kicking, 50-yard field goals at practice, but we never actually were, put it, to good use. But I just remember, in high school, I was, okay, well, I'm going to kick off. I'm going to run down and tackle that guy too. So, I was kind of a double threat, but soccer was, it was fun.
And when I've got to ask you, mate, about where do you play in that, or in the immortal words of Lady the brothel?
What position, son?
I was, when you get into sports, you want to be that glory guy, right? You want to be the one scoring the goal. My dad was a very physical fullback, and I naturally, for lack of a better term, kind of progressed into that. So when you have a great coach, they know where your strengths are. So I ended up on this club team playing fullback, just like my dad.
And what kind of age were you then, Jamie? What age was this?
Between 10, 11, and 14.
Oh, okay, yeah.
We had that club team. So, before high school. And my dad and his friends, bunch of Brits, they all had this thing like none shall pass, and they were very physical players. So I think I kind of like inherited that. So it helped out when I went to football being physical. But I just loved being that guy, the last line of defense in soccer, and it was great. I don't need to be the glory guy.
We're an extremely quick player, mate, because to me you look like an athlete. Like some guys look like an athlete. They just look like they're, you could say pretty much pick your discipline. You could say, okay, 100-meter sprint right through to high jump, and you think, I bet that dude can do a bit in everything. You look like that guy. You look like you're very well proportioned. You look like you're lean. You're not carrying any excess. You're pretty tall. You probably have a pretty good stride gait. You look like you could do a bit. Were you one of the faster players out there, or were you naturally athletic compared with your peers at a young age?
At one point, I was the fastest guy on the team. I think I started my soccer career at like a halfback. And ironically, I was all league in football and track, but I was a long jumper. I didn't do high jump. I was long jump, triple jump.
Yeah, I can see that.
And which was kind of interesting because I'm listening to your show and you were talking to Jerry. I didn't know was he a high jumper or a pole vaulter or something weird?
It was something weird. It was something like a high jumper, wasn't it? And I remember at the time thinking, it's amazing, isn't it? You wouldn't, but I have seen pictures of Jerry when he's a young man.
Oh yeah,
and he's utterly different shape,
right? So I was pretty fast, but there's always people faster, right? So when I remember going to the CIF championships, and for some reason they put me on the second leg of the relay, and I'm like, okay, I guess I have to. So I just remember guys 6'3" running past me, when I got the baton, and I'm like, yeah, those guys are made to do this. I wasn't. So I naturally gravitated towards a sport where you don't have to run, which is arm wrestling. So, but yeah, I had fun doing it.
So at what age did you sort of show an interest in strength sports, mate? Were you always, and was your family always interested in, because we get a lot of guys on here and they'll say similar things. Oh yeah, I loved World's Strongest Man or powerlifting, they've got some kind of obvious crossover. With soccer and with your dad being into that, not so much. But at what age did you start to sort of show interest in strength sport?
Well, without being too cliche, I remember 1986, 87, I saw Over the Top. Mm-hmm. And my buddies and I were arm wrestling ever since we saw that movie. Okay. So when I tell people what I do now, they're not surprised. Like the people that I grew up with, they're like, yeah, you were doing that on lunch tables in middle school and stuff like that. I remember in middle school, I was really fascinated with Muscle and Fitness magazine and just like, I was like, all right, well, I'm a skinny kid. Well, let me lift weights. So I started curling and I would do that every day. Like maybe that's how I was able to build biceps. I don't know, because I was curling in middle school and I had a natural bicep. Mm-hmm. So I think my strength, or at least, well, I guess you can call it strength, started there, just dumbbells, curling. And, I played soccer. I did one season of basketball, which I probably could have taken that a little bit further, but I didn't. But I was always interested in bodybuilding. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger, I just loved that look, the physique. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do this. Like, I'm just going to lift weights and see what happens. And I was always a skinny kid in high school too. I mean, I played football at 160 pounds, but I had biceps. That was the weird thing. Like, that was the one thing I had. I mean, I couldn't build my legs or anything.
Did you have the biceps before you started doing the curls, or did they come as a result of that?
You know what? I think it was a result of that. Naturally lean. I guess I was gifted in my genetics, but I was able to build them pretty quick.
Because it's still one of your strongest lifts, isn't it, the curl? Unless I'm mistaken, you still got a hell of a bicep curl. Weren't you going for the world record at one point in your body weight?
Yeah, actually, I've set that. Well, I don't know if it's the official record. I beat it on my lunch break when I used to work at a nutritional store. I had some weights in the back, and I was doing some research, and I think I was 160 pounds, and I did 165, which I don't know what the record was. I think it was like in the 150s at that point. Yeah. But yeah, I've crushed that official record many times.
So you did a 165 bicep curl at a body weight of 160.
The strict curl, yeah, and I've done 176. I was going to make another run at it. I think Tom Holland lit a fire under my butt because they've been posting all this stuff, and I'm like, cool.
Yeah.
But I'm a little heavier now, and I haven't trained for it, so it was a little bit painful when I tried to do it, and I'm like, you know what, I have to go train and do that. But I've done it, and I think if I ever took a run at it, I could crush that record.
Yeah, very interesting. It's funny that you see, you guys that had started very young in an area, because there's a lot of, I'm not going to say negativity around weight training, but if you get into weight training too young, it can be problematic for kids, But right. I think that, that age around the sort of 14, 15-year-old mark, I think most guys that end up progressing into strength sport are already on their way at that stage. Mm-hmm. That most people we tend to speak to, I was one of them. We had Eric Spotto, telling us some crazy numbers that he did from a really young age. But so many times you speak to guys who are in strength sports and they all say the same thing, that they got into it pretty early, and most of them with no detrimental effects to speak of, Right. It's mostly beneficial, and they've got into the ascendancy in that. So once you'd cracked the old biceps off them, mate, did you start doing more all-round strength training? Was that your thing? Were you going for just the physique and trying to be the Arnold Schwarzenegger look?
Yeah, as soon as I got to college, I really took it to that next level. I think the heaviest I ever got in college was 8, so I never saw 200 until I became, an older man, I guess you could say, in my late 30s. So it was hard for me to gain. I mean, I was eating all the time and I was staying lean, so I was kind of blessed there. Like, when I first started arm wrestling in 2005, I probably could have trained for like 3 months and walked in and won a fitness competition. Like, I was just shredded. almost like, you remember Rick Salawada?
I do, yeah.
Shredded, but I was, I had a little bit more size on me. So, I mean, that was just kind of like my natural physique. And it was surprising how I was able to make 154 pounds easy, or even on accident. Like the first time I saw you was in April of 2005 at the Ultimate Arm Wrestling. And that's where I saw you.
Was that the first time we met?
I didn't meet you, but I saw you wearing a polo that said UK Natural. And I said, I need to know that guy. And I'm going to meet him at some point. And that's kind of where I took your nickname. So
that's okay, mate. Hey, I'll take that as a compliment. In fact, if anyone is gonna use my nickname, I would love it to be somebody like you. Absolute ambassador of the sport, mate. Couldn't pick a nicer bloke to do it. So yeah, I'll take that as a massive compliment. But I thought it's funny. He's always trying to join up. I mean, Michael Todd and Engin are great at joining up that day. Oh, it was then that time. It all blurs into one for me a lot of the time. There are certain bits that stick out, and I can remember things, the events in great detail, but when the date was or when exactly it happened, God, I haven't got a key clue.
No, I only have 16, 17 years of experience here, but that was like the day for me. That was my second tournament. I just remember watching the pros on Saturday, and I'm standing there like, wow. Just
it was a mega show, wasn't it? Just a mega show, the Ultimate.
Yeah. Really Cobra was in the 154s, and he was, I guess he was making his comeback, and I just remember watching all you guys just in awe. And I told Harold Ryden, I said, look, I made 154s on accident because I was 170 pounds a month prior in my first tournament, but I didn't work out after that because I was in so much pain. So I made 154. I called Harold, and I said, well, what do you suggest I do? And he said, don't do anything. I'll be up there filming. I'll watch you. We'll start training after. I'm not going to fill your head with any. So I just soaked it in, man. I watched that entire tournament. I think it ended at like 10 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah, it was a late one, wasn't it? I had to leave. I was actually doing some stuff for the UFC that day. I don't know whether you remember, there's a UFC on that night, and I had to literally leave. Like, I had to get out of Dodge because I thought it'd be over by then, so I double booked myself.
Wow.
But, yeah, hell of a show, mate. I really enjoyed that show a lot. Both of those are actually Ultimates. But so we don't get like a Guy Ritchie film, which we often do, and end up joining things together, as you've probably seen in all these shows. Let's go back to sort of the origins of why arm wrestling. Where did arm wrestling first come on your radar? You've done it after Over the Top. You started to do bits and bobs with your friends, but where, in terms of organized sort of event awareness of an event in your area, mate?
Okay, kind of like a quick, I guess, history. Over the Top started arm wrestling. Arm wrestled on lunch tables, just like every guy, right? Everybody's done it. I won the 8th grade tournament that we had, and I was the skinny kid, and I beat everybody. Arm wrestled in bars. Finally, at 24 years old, I said, you know what, let me look this up, because I was watching ESPN, and I remember seeing Bill Sinks, Ron Bath, Mike Solaris, and I'm like, dude, this is awesome. Let me go try it out. So I did some research, and back then, obviously we didn't have Facebook, but we had the message board, which I found, and then I found the tournament. So I went to, in 2005 in March 12th, 2005, I remember the day. I went to, it was somewhere in Los Angeles, a little bit north of Los Angeles. John Bergeson was hosting the West Coast 2. And this was the year after John Berzink Challenge. So, of course, all that pops up. I'm like, wow, I'm going to meet all these guys, so let's go. So I drove over. I think it was 170. I made the 176 amateur class. But I went there wanting to pull pro, obviously, because you see there's money. Not knowing what I was really getting into. The first person I saw that day was Alan Fisher, and I recognized him from the movie.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
Recognized his face, and I recognized his hand. Shook his hand. I was like, Jesus. I met Luke. Luke was the first guy that actually talked to me, Luke Kent.
Okay.
And we were chit-chatting a bit, and he said, well, you might want to do the amateurs. And he was being, genuinely honest.
Yeah, it's going to be nice. Yeah.
I said, you know what, you're right. So I kind of like humbled myself really quick, and I pulled the amateurs. I ended up going undefeated. But I had to arm wrestle Alan in the overall anyway, because Alan won, he actually beat Bill Berzink, which was amazing. Like, I recognized, it was crazy. I recognized Bill, but I thought he was John, because doing research, I'm like, well, that's that one guy who's really famous. And
Yeah.
they're like, no, it's his brother.
Yeah.
I'm like, what, there's two of them?
Yes.
So making their way down, Alan beat Bill. And then like 2 matches later, and I had to beat or arm wrestle Alan, and he just slammed me.
That's a tremendous win for Alan there, isn't it? Against Bill, jeez.
It was amazing. It's on ARM TV. So that was my first introduction to organized arm wrestling, was that tournament where I met Harold and Simon was there. It was just a crazy 176 class that I would have got smoked if I entered the pros, you know. So I'm glad I did amateur. Ended up like not knowing how to arm wrestle, but using what I naturally had was a kind of like, I used to set up in that natural mat mask top roll, which I don't do anymore because I can't. So now I'm more, you know.
Dragging, yeah.
Right. But God, it was amazing. So, and I
have a cool story actually, Jamie, because you're you know, I know we've spoken about it before, but the fact that your path and career path has been so linked to Alan, and you've crossed paths so often, and yet the first professional arm wrestler that you ever sort of gripped up with or acknowledged was that guy. It's funny, isn't it, how things work out? Weird, really strange.
Yeah. And he beat me for 12 years until I finally got that one win in WAL, and a lot of respect for that guy. Yeah. But I mean, well, you were there. WAL was my. I'll never forget that match.
And when we get to that in your story, we're going to cover that in great detail, mate, because that was, you put on a masterclass that day. For those of you who haven't seen that match, get yourself over and check that out. The entire, I'm pretty sure the entire card is available on YouTube. You'd probably be able to see the entire fight night, every match on there. And that was obviously a massive event. It was the event where Chafee pulled with Devon, wasn't it, as well?
Yes.
Middle of that season, middle of the 500 season. So yeah, check that out, because later in these shows we'll be covering that in detail with Jamie. But when you first started, mate, after that first event, I'm taking it that you were pretty torn up. I mean, you pulled guys like Alan Fisher. I'm sure your joints were in bits and pieces after that.
Yeah, it felt like I didn't really have too much of a hard time in that weight class that I pulled, but it was sore. Like my joints were sore. I didn't work out. But I'm looking up arm wrestling. I'm like, hey, I'm going to go to Vegas next month. And that's where I went to the Ultimate Arm Wrestling 2, I think it was. Oh, man. And I did the amateurs. I took 4th. I lost to Corey Miller. So I got to pull Corey Miller in the amateurs that day. And you know what? What's crazy is I've never been in the strap because I've only arm wrestled one event. So every one of my matches went to the strap because I was trying to overpower everybody, and everybody kept slipping out of my hand. I was a big 154 guy. You know, it was weird how I made that weight. I even had one of the referees say, in this weight class? I'm like, yeah.
Tell you to go away.
I was huge. So I remember, I muscled through everybody in the strap, and then Corey took me to school. And Corey ended up taking 2nd that day, if that tells you anything. There was a guy named Ali who beat him.
Yeah, I was going to say, who the hell won that one? And it was, mate, you never know if it was at the Ultimate. It could have been some guy from overseas who was, you know, an amateur.
Right. Referee. His name's Ali something. Like, I saw him reffing in years after that. But yeah, he had a war with Corey, and Corey took 2nd, and it was crazy. But yeah, it was a great experience, man.
And I'm taking it you met other arm wrestlers at that event who sort of took you under the wing a little bit and got you training, because California is kind of a mecca of arm wrestling, isn't it, really? I mean, obviously you've got the traditional stories that everybody's aware of with Bill Sabrines and so on, and the development of the sport there. But it's always been an active area, a great area as well. California is one of my favourite places on earth, period. I absolutely love it. I've often said if I was going to move anywhere, I could definitely do me some California, mate. Let me tell you now. I have so many places over there. Oh, God, don't say. You never know. You never know. I'll tell you this. Every time I've been over there, the arm wrestlers are so welcoming. There's so many great pullers out there as well. Again, guys that don't necessarily get that recognition, but there's some beasts in California. So who was the first sort of club you started to train with?
I used to drive every Saturday after the Vegas tournament, every Saturday after that, I would drive to Harold's house and train with him, Bruce Way, John Woolsey.
Okay.
John Woolsey was the guy, and he messaged me not too long ago, and he said, hey, man, I've been following, because I said happy birthday because it was his birthday, and he messaged me and said, hey, I've been following you, and he just said he was very proud of what I've been doing. He was the first guy that showed me that you can top roll with your tricep. And I'm like, it didn't make any sense. But like that whole, like I always thought you had to top roll this way. So as soon as I realized that I am stronger coming back and utilizing some of my tricep, because I can push a lot of weight, everything just clicked. And I didn't understand it at the time. But that guy, I mean, and you're gripping up with like the strong version of Clint Eastwood. And
he really is, isn't he? I get that.
Well,
he really does.
he's so much knowledge.
Oh, he's a lovely bloke.
It was a great group to train with. You know, him and Harold and Alan would show up. He used to have massive practices, and Jake was just starting out maybe a couple months after me. So, you know, we would have these giant practices, and I would do that every Saturday for like a year. It was just, that's kind of where I started, man.
It's a nice place to start there because you've got some really welcoming characters there, guys who can articulate themselves very well and guys with real technical depth.
Right.
You know, right. I mean, you spoke about John Woolsey, obviously massive pedigree himself.
Yes.
Those guys who don't know John, go and try and find, I'm sure there's someone on TV, but John was a really, really credible puller in that period. You know, in his time, he was a bad man, right in the mix in all the major tournaments over there, and a really technical, stout puller. Also, you've got Harold, who you spoke about, another guy, very, very experienced bloke, connected with everyone and anyone in the sport, will talk to anybody. And another guy with real weaponry, you know, huge hands, long arm, good top roller, and such a lovely guy as well. Will share every ounce of knowledge. You're probably, some of the guys watching the show would know Harold's face, just if nothing else from the cornerman yourself when you were at the WAL. But Harold died an absolutely stout guy, brilliant bloke.
Love the guy. And I talked to him the other day, and yeah, he's going to make a comeback, he said.
Good for him.
He owes me because I told them when I'm 40, because I turned 40 this year, next month, he promised me a long time ago that he, Jake, and I would go to a world championship together in the Masters classes.
Yeah. And
Jake's coming back too. You know, he's done fighting.
Right. Absolutely. That I'm pleased about. It looks like Bear's going to be doing a little bit. His boy, I've seen him hitting the pads.
Yeah. He's ready.
Imagine that kid when he's 25.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you're putting the band back together, mate. Absolutely tremendous. So how long did it take you to sort of get into the mix over there? When were you, because everybody's got that moment in their career where they think, yeah, I'm arriving now. I'm in this thing, and people start to talk about you, and people start to sort of, you show up at the tournament, and the local guys all know that you're there. You know, they know they're in a match. When was that day? Because I can imagine that took a little bit of time over there, because you've got some real names to establish yourself against. Not like you're surrounded by bums in California.
Right. With the exception of the elite, like, you know, Harold and Alan, I was able to beat pretty much everybody my first year, which, aside from me seeing UK Natural on your shirt and me being a huge fan of Randy Couture, he's my favorite fighter. In fact, I got to meet him at the Arnold Classic the only time I went, and I said, I think I told him, hey, I borrowed your nickname as well. And he was like, cool, and I took a picture with him. After that first year, I couldn't make it to practice a lot, but I was still winning. Like, enough to do locally fine, but not at the elite level. So it was kind of a joke, like, oh, he's a natural, that kind of thing. So I kind of just made that. And it kind of took off, and obviously I used that for my business. But, you know, it's funny you mentioned that, because Gary's been posting videos. 2005 Nationals. I watched that last night. That was my first Nationals, 5 months into the sport, when Ray Hendricks took me to school. I think Luke Kent took second. So I flew all the way to Arkansas 5 months into the sport, 4 months into the sport, pulled Nationals just to get a wake-up call to see what this was all about. And it just made me want to get better. And So I figured, okay, well, I'm beating everybody around here. Let me go travel and see what this sport's about because I know these guys are badass, you know, and I'm still making 154 pounds. I'm kind of confident that I can do okay. I think I won 2 matches and I lost. Ray ended up winning that day. And he was on my radar for years, and I just never saw him until 2016 where I got to beat him. Mm-hmm. And it was just great. But I think that first year, let's flash back a month before that. 2 months before that, I went up north and pulled where I met Tom Nelson, and I took second in this long war. I don't even know who the guy was. Tom comes up to me right after that and says, "You know why you lost? Because you're stupid." And like, I didn't know him at the time, so I'm like, "Who the hell is this guy?" And then he said, "Let me explain." And he explained it. And now we're friends, you know what I mean? So it's like, I took that, I guess that knowledge that he was trying to give me because he saw some potential in me. And, I just took it and ran with it. And I'm like, okay, well, I need to learn more about this sport. So 16 years later, I mean, you're constantly learning. Like, I don't think I've reached my full potential until maybe like last year because I'm starting to make things click. And you have to take losses to do that. It's amazing.
Of course you do. At what point one of the things that always strikes me about you, Jamie, you're obviously a guy that's got fingers in pies. You've got a successful business. Now, was any of what were you doing for a living at this time? Were you looking at your own thing then? Were you working for someone else? What was the sort of time split and the commitment split for you then? Because, you know, looking at you and looking at your family, you'd think your ears would be longer. You don't mind a kiddie winky, mate. You can just churn out a kid. So I can't imagine that you are able to focus on arm wrestling as much as you would like. And I'm wondering whether that was always the case and you've just sort of always had that ability to fit it in and be flexible with it, or whether those distractions have just come to the fore much later. What was sort of the vibe back then? Were you 100% in, or were you partially committed?
I was in the gym business for many, many years. So, which wasn't my path that I was trying to take. I went to school, got my law and political science law degree. I was getting my master's in national security. I wanted to kind of take the route that my dad took, and I was going to go in the military and then start working for the government and kind of see where that went. And then I think with the fallout of 9/11, I didn't want to fight that fight. So I went to the gym and I started managing gyms. I was a trainer. So I had the flexibility to do whatever I wanted on the weekends. So I'm like, hey, I'm going to go arm wrestle. And the gyms liked it because they thought it was cool. In fact, my very first gym management job, all they wanted to talk about was arm wrestling. And I went to this seminar. There's like 100 of us. And the guy who was hosting it used to arm wrestle with Harold.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he was a big guy. I don't know if you've ever, he didn't like take it very, very far, but out here he was pretty good. Mm-hmm. And he saw me in the crowd. He's all, hey, you're Jamie, right? And I said, yeah. And then we ended up talking in this seminar for like work about arm wrestling for like 5 minutes. And people were just like, what the hell are they talking about? It was kind of funny. But so, I mean, I did have the luxury of being able to, you know, go arm wrestle on the weekends and travel. And nowadays it's a little bit tougher. You know, I have kids and married. I can imagine. But, so if it wasn't for WAL, I don't think I'd arm wrestle that much unless it was local. But I really want to get back into, you know, at least one major tournament a year, just travel. Like I told Dallas Langston the other day after his Mississippi showing, I said, hey, you pick a place in the country based on somebody you want to beat for next year around the league stuff, and I'll go with you. There's plenty of 176 guys that I could fight. Yeah. So we're going to probably consider that because I miss it, man. I mean, I gotta do something. And the wife was like, hey, you need to go arm wrestle. So get your ass to Utah. Everybody bailed on me that was supposed to go. We had this huge group that was going to go, and she's like, well, you're supposed to go. So, you know, a couple of us went, and glad I did because I needed it. trained so hard this year. You know, didn't get to arm wrestle Adam, and so I was ready.
Yeah.
And I did pretty good, so.
Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the close for this first episode with Jamie the Natural Sheldon. But we ain't done with this lad yet. We've got many, many more to come, ladies and gents. So, usual drill, put your questions in the comments. We're going to be running another show in a second, but any questions you put in there on this part 1, I'm sure we'll make show number 3. Get them in the comments section, guys. Let us know what you want to talk about with this fella, and we will oblige, unless it's something really bad and he tells us to cough. But other than that, we'll go for it. If this is your first visit to Supernatural Strength Channel, ladies and gents, make sure you like, share, and please hit that subscribe button, guys. Let everybody know about it. Crazy times out there, but until we see you next time on the Supernatural Strength Channel alongside The Natural, take it easy, peeps.